Hey guys, Nick Wheeler here again at Wheeler Customized. So in today's video we're going to go ahead and get started on hand sanding the Joe Paranee project blades. Basically we're going to go ahead and I'll show you how I lay down a hand sanded finish on these blades, and that will try to give some insight to the guys buying these things, what it takes to get that done, and then for my knife making friends, kind of show the steps that I take. Everybody does things different, so as always, no claim that the way I do things are the only way or the best way, but I think that that they work, and I'll show some of these tools and little gadgets and stuff that I've come up with for helping me to do the job efficiently and with the least amount of pain possible. So anyway, with that said, let's go ahead and get started sanding these things up. Okay, it's important to be able to lock this thing down rigidly, securely, and it helps with not wasting energy when you're sanding, but even more importantly, it's for safety. This is like the 7th generation of this that I've built. The original one that I first got the inspiration for was from Roger Green, who studied under D.E. Henry, and he's retired now. But anyway, I moved to a sanding station for a while, but I've gone back to the bench vise because I can easily move this thing at an angle, which I prefer. This is just 2 pieces of angle iron that are tacked together. I've got the dagger shape and cleared the front end out. So I've got my 1/4-20 support screws, some 1/4 inch micarta on here for a backing plate, and really this thing, it holds the blade secure, which is all good. It helps with sanding efficiency, but the main thing for this for me is safety, because these blades, they're ground really thin. This side's already all sanded out. They're ground thin. I came back with some 500 grit paper and I dulled the very edge of it, but it's still, if you ram your finger into this when you're going back and forth, going to town sanding this, you're gonna cut the crap out of yourself. So having something like this where you can stay away from the cutting edge is important. So a quick grip clamp of some sort works pretty well, but I'd wanted something that was going to hold everything really securely, be quick, and most importantly, just be really rigid. And so I've made this thing, which is used in conjunction with this. This is a clamp. Yeah, it took me a little bit of time to make it because I actually made this out of solid 1-inch plate, so it's pretty beefy. But it's a clamp made just for this sanding support. And I could have mounted this in the lathe and turned an internal Acme thread on there, but instead what I opted to do was I machined the part out, mounted it in the mill drill, and I bored a hole through here, and then cannibalized a 4-inch C-clamp like this. This is a cheap one. I cut the threaded end of the clamp off, and that left me with this insert and the screw, the swivel pad, and the handle. And I mounted it in the lathe, and I turned that piece so that it was round, and then I bored a hole in here and welded that insert in there so that I had my threads in there. It was just a lot easier than cutting the threads myself. And then I took the screw and I ditched the swivel pad that came with it, and I turned a much larger one out of some 4/16, and when I put the handle back through, I actually made an extension so I could get a little more leverage when I cranked this thing down. And this was cut on the milling machine so that I've got a nice sliding fit, and then all we do is put our blade wherever we need it. And having it like this, I can sand easily along this blade. I don't have my sanding support interfering with anything, but I can put this up here where the cutting edge is a safe distance from my fingers, and then just clamp this down, and then everything's nice and secure. I can just, I can go to town sanding this thing without worry of this edge hanging out in open air just waiting to bite me. And you can still bump into it. There's obviously some clearance here, but it's not nearly as risky as if this thing were just out in open air hanging off the edge of a board or something like that. Let's go ahead and clamp her down. Okay guys, so we've got our blade clamped down secure. We've come off the disc grinder with 320 grit paper with the grease compound and the rubber backing. The blade's ready to lay down a hand sanded finish. Now, if you were to go to my hand sanding 101 video, that was geared towards guys that were doing a more rudimentary grinding job, a little less years standing in front of the grinder. Now, this knife, that's not the case. This is how I actually do it in my shop at this point in my life, and so you could take it up to damn near whatever grit you want on the disc, but I stop where I did and I start here where I do, just because it's the best way for me to get the best end result. And so this blade has plenty nice enough finish that we could take our sanding bar, some 320 grit, and we could come in line with the length of this blade and hand sand it. But what I like to do is come in and sand my initial foundation about 30 degrees off the center line, which that part is similar to what I did in the other video, but instead of starting with the coarse grit, we're starting with 320 grit paper. And the reason I do it that way is everything's pretty damn smooth coming off that disc, but I'm trying to dial in the edge geometry to the optimal finished result, because we want it to look really good, a nice aesthetically pleasing hand sanded finish. But the other thing is, the smoother this is all blended together, the less resistance we're going to have when we're cutting stuff. And so anybody who's been around boats, if you've got a nice deep V hole in a boat, it's going to glide through the water nice and smooth. It's going to cut through the water, cut nice clean lines. And it's the same thing with the blade. If we've got a nice smooth geometry of that, you're just gonna glide through whatever you're cutting. You're not gonna have a lot of resistance. And it's easiest for me personally, this is the way I do stuff, to make sure that that's all dialed in with my hand sanding. And so I start at that 30 degrees off center, just because it's easiest for me to see what's going on and to make sure stuff is blended. And once I do that, and it really won't take all that long, once we do that at that angle, then we come back and we sand this thing in line with the length of the blade. And I'm gonna stick with the 320 because once you get to where you got some practice in, you can lay down a nice clean finish. The 320 grit it will look really nice, and it won't be so polished that it'll be as hard to maintain as if we took it up to, say, like 1500 or 2000 or something like that. And so yeah, it's clamped down secure with my handy dandy fixture. Got my handy dandy sanding bar, and we've got some strips of 320 grit red line Rhino-Wet sandpaper, and we're ready to go ahead and lay down this base foundation hand rub finish. So let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, for the sake of clarity here, this one has the initial foundation laid down. See, our sanding marks are all at that 30-degree angle off center line, and then if we go to this side has been sanded in line. So we did this first. We did our angled sanding first, and then came back and in line with the blade. Nice clean finish on here. So there's probably some J hooks or some stop and start marks in here at this point, but that's okay because, you know, we have a long way to go. We still need to go ahead and hand sand our ricasso. We need to cut in our guard shoulders, all that kind of stuff. And so there's no reason to go totally crazy with doing, like, you know, as pristine a finish as we can on this blade until we're ready to go ahead and assemble things. At least not the way I do stuff. So anyway, this is our initial foundation, and then we make it look like this. And so at this point I'm ready to go ahead and sand this side in line, and we'll go ahead and start sanding on that clip. And it's really important to me to maintain this sharp and crisp transition from one bevel to the next. And of course, you know, we could clamp this up with the other fixture, or, you know, clamp it to a board, whatever, and sand this, but then you're kind of contorting your body to try to work at finding that angle. And so something that I did, just one of those little things I was pondering about, had an idea, to make that easier, I made this little fixture, and it's very simple. It's just a piece of angle iron. I shaped it kind of like my other fixture. I've got a piece of heavy gauge pipe that it's welded to with some little stanchions, so I can put it in the pipe jaws of my multi-purpose bench vise, and the stanchions just give me clearance so that I can rotate it side to side. And a lot of guys tape up their blades and stuff. I kind of quit doing that. I just take a piece of this is one of my catalogs, fold it up and lay it down, and then put the blade on here so that it's secure, and then I can rotate this until I get this to a position where it's comfortable to work on this clip. Let's look at it from a different angle. Okay, here I've got it set at the camera at a different angle. I think if I take this level, this will help explain what I'm trying to show here. We can set this up, and it doesn't have to be set up where it's level, but you can set this up so that when we go to hand sand this with our sanding bar, you know, we're working at what's a comfortable angle, instead of, you know, moving our body all around trying to match up to that angle. And it just makes it a lot more comfortable, and it, for me, in my humble opinion here, it makes it easier to sand that out and keep everything nice and crisp and clean. So it's a simple tool that doesn't take very long to make, but I think it makes it a lot nicer to do this part of the sanding.
No matter which phone you choose, our plan start at $40 a month. But what about... Pick the phone you want on the plan you want. Unlimited talk, text, and data starting at only $40 a month. And right now, you can get a free phone or $100 off. G4G high-speed data. Video streaming may be limited to 3G speeds. Shrinking payment discounts are not included with...
Hottest prices around. Clothes Mentor carries women's sizes 0 through 26 and maternity. So there's something for everyone, especially the label lovers. And their inventory is made up of the like-new, better brand names you prefer.
We've got to sand this spine out, and since the clip is raised, this whole thing is a gentle arc, and if this was flat, it'd be easy to take a wide sanding paddle like this. You could come in like this and make sure that it's super smooth. Now we did the best that we could coming off of the 5-inch contact wheel to get a smooth pull on this and have a nice surface finish, but it's kind of inevitable. It seems like there might be a little bit of stuff here and there, and so what I like to do, I've got this sanding bar. It's just, I think it's 1084, but I surface ground it, but then I put a radius on the edges, and what that allows me to do is wrap the paper around here nice and tight, and I can come up here, I can sand at an angle and make sure that we have a nice flat plane, you know, that this is squared or the sides of our blade, but it allows me to come right up into that curve and not hit on a square corner. And you know, if you use a completely round sanding bar, you have this little bitty surface area contact as you go, and it wears through the paper super quick, and it's hard to actually establish anything as being, you know, super smooth. It's really easy with a, you know, like a dowel or a piece of rod, just to ride in and out of ripples. And so with this, I can come in and I'm not doing major stock removal here. I'm starting a 320 grit, but I can, just like we did with our main bevels, I can come in at around a 30-degree angle to the center line. But see, I can creep right up into that curve, and I'm not biting in with that leading edge, since this is rounded over. So it makes a huge difference, and we can lay that down, get a nice foundation on that.